Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Happy Sunday. Everybody excited to be here?
Yeah.
I am. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to be here and share with you today my experience of spiritual and ethical living. Spirit and ethics, such small little words for such huge, big, important concepts. Spirituality allows us to develop a meaningful connection with something bigger than ourselves. When I say bigger, I don't simply mean a higher power or a divine philosophy. Although spirituality certainly puts us together with those and connects us with those. Spirituality provides the perspective to recognize that our divine life is of great value. It points us to greater purpose in life. It teaches us that everything is connected in divine presence. And spiritual living, therefore, is moving through life with an awareness that we are part of the connected universality of it all. When we pray, when we go to church, when we read books, when we read the Bible or Scripture, it teaches us that everything is connected. But I believe if we leave church and we're swearing at the traffic when we leave, or that I think about my roommate didn't clean up the kitchen this morning before I left, we're not carrying Spirit with us out into the world when we leave. Instead, we're coming to church to get a quick God fix, so to speak. And then we go back to our regular life. But when we are in a state of living in spiritualness, we hold on to that light that spirituality gives us, that we're a part of it, connected to. And we carry that warmth of that ignite, of that spark that ignites inside of us and brings us connected to spirituality and to Spirit. We often describe words of spirituality like love, compassion, tolerance, forgiveness, patience, trying to do good for others. And when I think about that list I just read, it seems like a lot. It seems sort of overwhelming. That's a pretty big order sometimes for us to live by. But moving through this erratic world, behaving with tolerance and forgiveness, spiritual and ethical living all the time, well, I've got good news. It's actually pretty easy. Because when we experience the divine's actually waiting to embrace us also. Half the time we just need to get out of our way. And I learned that personally, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. But building spiritual values and practices and strength activates our spirit. Connection to the divine when we're giving, and the power that we need to live an ethical life. A life of purpose and a life of fulfillment. So the title of my talk today is Spiritual and Ethical Living. And you may be thinking, now I got to live ethical too? We just learned how to be spiritual. The reason why I'm speaking about both spiritual and ethical living is because they're linked together. Linked together hand in hand like parent and child. Spiritual living is ultimately a deeply personal search for the expression of Spirit within us. It speaks to us internally, it speaks to us in our heart and in our soul. Ethical living is the external expression of spiritual awareness and strength. Ethical living is how we project ourselves into the world, outward, daily, day by day. So if spiritual living happens personally, privately, in our hearts and in our souls, then ethical living is what we do out in the world. It's with our hands, our words, and our actions every single day. So to begin to live ethically in the world, it often requires spiritual work, accepting and embracing the truth of oneness of us all, our humanity, despite whatever differences we may have. So remember how I said spiritual and ethical living are connected like parent and child? And I said that divine wants to embrace you too? Well, if you can just find a state of living where you live just a little bit ethical, just a little bit of ethics, show compassion to a stranger, do something for someone else without expecting a reward, just smile. Just smile to someone. That's ethics. When we do that, and we can find those simple moment-to-moment ethical behavior, then Spirit will envelop us. It will envelop you. So spiritual and ethical living support and nurture each other. A spiritual life may be the fertile soil upon which ethic grows. But that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean necessarily that we have to always believe that we are totally spiritual, we're totally ethical. Sometimes it just doesn't work that way. Sometimes we just have to take those moments and do what we can, and it grows from there. Spirit and ethics grow from there. So I take that as a consideration to let spirituality and spirit fill our hearts. Every time we make that smile, every time we show compassion, it fills our heart and it fills others. So the ethical living benefits are astounding, y'all. From ethical living for me, which grows from my spiritual awareness, is that we're all connected. And it teaches me empathy. Ethical living contains the essence of compassion and the desire to alleviate the stress and the problems and the suffering of others out in the world. Ethical conduct is when we refrain from causing harm to others and their expectation of happiness and a good life, just like we want. Don't we all want to live a good life and be happy? Well, you do, and you do, and you do, and they do. And when we're living ethically, we support and encourage that out in the world. The journey that led me to this message today and to being here with you guys, actually, is one of spiritual suffering and spiritual transformation. The suffering I most related to recently, the past 2 years, I guess, was the suffering of death. The death of my sister in August of 2018, and then my mom died in March of 2019. And it just put me into a deep grief. And with all the spiritual teachings I've known, I've been in Unity since I was about 14 years old, and off and on in San Francisco for the last 23 years. But I ended up in a deep, deep grief and depression. I didn't understand it. Why did they just have to drop dead? There was nothing wrong with them. So I went home. I just cried after I went back to Tennessee to their funerals. I came back home. I was living in Vallejo at the time. I had a job there for the last 15 years that started in San Francisco, and I quit my job. I lived off a little bit of savings that I had, and I wouldn't recommend that so much to anyone, to do that. So that brought a whole nother problem. But at any rate, I isolated in my house with my 2 doggies. I didn't go out. I didn't want to talk on the phone. I just stayed, I slept most of the day and stayed up most of the night and into the wee hours of the morning. And I just cried. I cried every day. And I would cry about my suffering, my loss. And I didn't understand it, and I didn't understand why God had to take them. And that's what my thought process was. But through this deep suffering, I saw nothing good about it. And all the practices and the teachings that I'd learned from Unity over the years, how when we die, our energy just goes back to God into a different form. I didn't believe any of that. I didn't understand it. I didn't want to understand it. All I wanted to see was how hurt I was. And how was I going to live without them? So, I was on my knees at one point. I actually was in my garage. I went down to my garage for something. And I just was so in pain that I just dropped to my knees. And I just cried out to God, to Spirit. And I said, help me. And I just started crying, help me. I didn't know how I was going to go forward. I didn't know what the next step was. I didn't know if I was going to go back to my job or go find another job or what was going to happen. So I just said, help me. And in that very moment, I felt this huge peace come over me like I'd never felt before. I felt the presence of Spirit in and around and through me like I had never felt that before either. And I knew that I knew that I knew that I was one and connected to Spirit at that time. And I heard that everything was for a reason and for a purpose. And that I was learning. And that I was going through this. The purpose was I was being given a message of love, of tolerance, forgiveness, understanding. and one that I was going to share. And at that moment, I said yes. I felt it. And I said yes to Spirit. I said yes to new life. And I said yes to going forward and getting up and getting back out into the world. And when that happened, miracles started happening. And so I knew that it was right, because doors closed in one area and doors just swung wide open in other areas. People came to help me. People showed up to support me and encourage me and to guide me and to lead me in this new life with this new message that I wanted to share with people. And because of that, I am now a student at Emerson Theological Institute. And in September this year, I graduate at Unity Village with my ordination and with a doctorate in interfaith religious studies. And so, thank you. So, one of the books that I had to read for school was by the Dalai Lama, and it was called Ethics for a New Millennium. It gave me a roadmap. I was engrossed in it. I just was reading every word of every page. And it gave me a roadmap to go deeper into consciousness of divine empower and to realize that all power was right here inside of me, right within me. That my purpose is to help others to live ethically in a way that encourages and loves and sees the face of God in every person that I meet and come in contact with. And to see their humanity and their desire for happiness just like I want to be happy. So I've made a conscious decision, myself, to walk every day, striving to do my best, and to live daily in spiritual and ethical principles. I mess up, y'all. I mess up once in a while, and I ask forgiveness for myself, and I ask forgiveness for others. Because back when I was on my knees that night, I had to learn to forgive. I had to learn to forgive everyone that had ever hurt me in my life. And at this point, I had to learn to forgive myself. So because when I'm living in spiritual and ethical conduct, life is so much better. Miracles happen, y'all. Transformation happens. And that's what I'm hoping for every one of us. Everyone that we come into contact with, and everyone that's here today, that we have transformation of consciousness. Transformation where we go out and we spread love and joy and kindness to people, no matter our differences. No matter our political views, our religious views, it becomes easy to see the divine in every person. We see, we feel the spirit of divine truth and mind working in and through us. And through this transformation, we find answers that we're searching for. We find a life that we will have of peace, of joy, of happiness. A life without drama. Wouldn't that be great? A life without other people's drama causing us drama. And a life without conflict, where conflict of others doesn't affect us. We're estranged to that, I guess. And when we exhibit this practice in times of adversity, when arguments come up, when we're faced with disagreements with people, we can behave in spiritual and ethical living and behavior at that time. We can start sharing forgiveness, offer tolerance, seeking to understand and asking questions, rather than arguing or violence or anger that may come up. Truly practicing presence with one another is the place of healing. And in that, we find that no matter what the differences are, or what they're going through, or what we're going through, when we connect through Spirit, we realize that we're all one. We're all on this journey together, and that Spirit resides in each and every one of us. We learn to navigate our life in ways that uplifts and encourages and supports others in their time of need. Sometimes it just takes a second, guys, a blink of an eye. We walk past someone on the street. First we connect to the eyes, then through our heart, and then through our souls. And we realize we're passing ourselves. We're all one. We're seeing the face of God, seeing the face of humanity, And in that brief moment, we are all connected. So I ask you today, how are you showing up every day? How are you making a difference in the world? What would happen if you showed up as your best self every day? How would that feel? What would that look like? Take your spiritual practice and put it into work today in the form of loving kindness. Put your actions and words to the test. Does it bring about harmony for others, or does it hurt others? Does it bring about good for the world and the people that we're engaging with, and our family, our friends, our colleagues? I encourage you to extend grace to the here and now, into your relationships, and everyone that you come into contact with. I support you in living spiritually and ethically, passionately, and intentionally. Let love rise up in you. Let compassion flow from you. See and feel and experience the humanity of us all. And you will be transformed. And you will be the conduit, the vehicle of transformation for someone else. Amen? Amen to that. So in closing, I'd like to read a poem that was in my book by the Dalai Lama. And it goes like this. May I become at all times, both now and forever, a protector for those without protection, a guide for those who have lost their way, a ship for those with oceans to cross, and a bridge for those with rivers to cross, a sanctuary for those in danger, a lamp for those without a light, a place of refuge for those who lack shelter, and a servant for all in need. Blessings to you and namaste. Thank you.